Resident Evil 5 entails some of the most terrifying creatures out of the entire Resident Evil series. From disturbing human mutations to nightmarish insectoids, these creatures will undoubtedly leave a chill down your spine. So here is the lore of every single Resident Evil 5 enemy. Town Majini were once normal residents of a small village in Kijuju, who have been infested by the Type 2 plagas and transformed into highly aggressive killers that would eliminate any outsiders. Once Albert Wesker obtained a plaga sample from the region of Valde Lobos and sent it to the pharmaceutical company known as Tricell, they would then begin to experiment with the virus and create new variations, with one being Plaga Type 2. This strain would be sold to an Islamic terrorist group based in Kijuju, where they then begin experimentation in the nearby village. As part of the first stage of the experiment, an initial 10 people were turned into Majini, and with their plagas already pregnant, were soon able to begin implanting more parasites into other people. Eventually, everyone would be infected, and as time went on, their everyday activities would grow stranger. Animals in the area would be found murdered and disemboweled, and people in the town would become aggressive and hostile towards others. Eventually, the situation got so out of hand that public executions were held in the center of town. By the time the BSAA arrived, the Majini were out of control. Town Majini often used everyday items as makeshift weapons, including wrenches, shovels, and bottles. Some were slightly better armed and wielded weapons such as axes and crossbows. They were very effective at taking down enemies by working together as a group. They were also capable of operating certain vehicles such as trucks and motorcycles for travel. Town Majini rarely erupt plagas, possibly owing to their early infection and lack of development time for the parasite. The Instigator Majini was the leader of the Islamic terrorist group that began experimentation in the town to recruit the civilian populace into his movement, which was to eradicate all British settlers, immigrants, and perceived race traitors. Once he gained control of 10 residents with the use of the Type 2 plaga, he would then send them out to abduct people off of the streets and implant infant plagas into their bodies to expand their numbers. The first known acts of violence committed by the Islamists and their Majini recruits took place at a bar frequented by British settlers and migrant workers, who he saw as both foreign invaders in Kijuju. On Friday, the 16th of January, he and his men went into the bar and started a fight after making a number of racist remarks about them. The fight ended with the bar trashed and the owner murdered. Over the following week, the instigator's increasing army began murdering their enemies on his command. On Friday, the 23rd of January, the bodies were collected in sacks at the Assembly Plaza and set alight as he gave a speech on the celebration of death, and their acts being justice. The instigators' rallies continued daily even into February, calling for violence on foreigners, and with that, those under his command attacked a hotel frequented by foreigners. The guests were dragged out by the mob and likely killed. Between the 7th through 13th of February, the Majini constructed a platform at the plaza for his own use, and their celebration of death moved from the burning of victims to beheadings conducted by the mutant executioner Majini. After alerting his followers to another rally, they brought with them Reynard Fisher, a BSAA spy, and had him beheaded. Immediately after this, he spotted Chris and Sheva watching from a nearby building and ordered the Majini to attack. The instigator then joined the fight with his army and perished. The Executioner Majini was a human mutant of the Type 2 plaga. Either by choice or by the parasitic influence, he joined the Instigator Majini's rebellion in Kijuju, which saw the deaths of perhaps hundreds of perceived foreigners and race traitors. This man's life before the rebellion is unknown. When implanted with the plaga, he reacted differently to its chemical secretions than other people. While enhanced strength was a common side effect, his was more radical than others. Furthermore, growth hormones led to a significant change in height, making him a towering figure among the other Kijuju residents. By mid-January of 2009, he had taken up the role of executioner in the Instigator Majini's rebellion, decapitating any enemies sent his way. The executioner was ultimately killed at the square when the audience spotted Chris and Sheva in the area. Allyson was a civilian casualty recorded during the 2009 Kijuju outbreak. Born overseas, Allyson and her boyfriend moved to Kijuju in late 2008. In the aftermath of a civil war, the region was in need of foreign workers at its quarry, which she got a job in. Soon after her arrival, Allyson began to take notice of an increase in low-profile insurgent activity, such as the spread of political posters, as well as unexplained animal attacks, which left her scared to leave the hotel at times. When she was willing to go out, she would go to a bar frequented by white settlers and foreign workers, where she would meet Adam, another quarry worker of white settler ancestry. At some point in December, Allyson's boyfriend went to work and never came back, though she would be told this was due to him being very busy. Over the course of January, the political instability in Kijuju became more and more apparent as many fights and riots began to emerge. Allyson spent the night with Adam to hide from the rioters, but left in the morning to go look for her boyfriend, intent on leaving Kijuju. Allyson ultimately failed to reach the quarry and kept hiding in the city for the next week. On the day of the BSAA entry into the city, Allyson was spotted by insurgents who chased her down a street and grabbed her. Though her screams got the attention of two BSAA operators, they were unable to reach her in time to stop one of the men forcing a Type 2 plaga down her throat. The parasite quickly hijacked her central nervous system, transforming her into a Majini, where she then attacked Chris as he checked on her. Though no longer in control of her actions, she was defeated by Chris and Sheva. Cephallo is the name given to the middle stage of the Type 2 plaga's life. This stage appears as long centipede-like parasites with a spiked bone protruding from its spine, which can be used as a weapon. Cephallo grows larger in size when their host Majini's head has been seriously damaged or destroyed, breaking through the neck to defend the rest of the host's body. At this point, they take complete control of the body's function, acting as a replacement brain. Unlike the Spanish plaga from Valdelobos, the Type 2 plaga forms are more resistant to sunlight and may be encountered outside at daytime. The Cephallo are incredibly resilient to gunfire, as most of the body is outside of the host when they come out, meaning further damage to the host body does little to stop it. The Kipepeo adds a new dimension to the threats faced by Chris Redfield and Sheva Alomar. Emerging from the bodies of infected hosts, these creatures resemble sinister, mutated insects with elongated bodies and sharp blade-like appendages for wings. Their design is a stark departure from the ground-based enemies encountered throughout the game, forcing players to shift their focus skyward and contend with the threats from all directions. The creatures' ability to swarm and attack in groups makes them capable of overwhelming the unprepared with their sudden assaults. These creatures are a result of the Type 2 plaga parasite reaching a mature stage within the infected host, allowing it to spawn these flying terrors. They were created by Tricell to market the sales of BOWs to bioterrorists, with their flight capabilities being of interest. As the name suggests, big Man Majini are universally large males, who oddly show less signs of plaga infestation than lesser Majini. They're all large, muscular men who wear shorts or sweatpants but no shirts. In addition, the big Man Majini never use weapons of any kind, preferring to get up close and personally take down their enemies with their bare hands. Although plaga infestation is known to cause extreme resilience and a slight increase in strength, the big Man Majini demonstrate these traits far beyond those of their brethren. These enemies can take far more punishment than ordinary Majini, and a single punch is enough to send their foes flying. The Chainsaw Majini was one of the most powerful type of Majini which appeared during the Las Plagas outbreak in Kijuju. These creatures are known for their unusual adaptation of the plaga parasite, which has formed a perfect bond with their host, greatly increasing their strength and durability to damage. The plaga also causes them to harbor a great desire to kill all non-infected humans. They lack the same coordination and language skills of other Majini, as the creatures are never observed taunting their foes, nor giving or responding to orders other Majini shout in combat. The only sounds they make are angry grunting from being hurt, along with incoherent screaming and laughter whenever they swing their saws. It's easy to assume their bond with the plaga, while greatly strengthening their bodies, has left them much less mentally stable compared to other Majini. A Chainsaw Majini often appears as a man wearing colored pants and a burlap sack on their head, which has a single hole exposing a single bloodshot eye. Their weapon of choice is a bloodstained chainsaw, which they use to brutally kill kill their targets, but whose weight slows them down. Chunks of missing flesh appear in the host's torso, arms, and hands. This suggests that the Chainsaw Majini either self-harm when they cannot satisfy their urge to kill, or they have received these wounds from people that try to defend themselves from the enemy. The Adjule is a feral African wild dog, which has been infected by one of Tricell's type 2 plaga. The parasite has deformed its head, turning the left and right sides into new sets of jaws for more powerful bites. These creatures have the same appearance as the zombie dogs, but their ears are down instead of pointed, and their skin is completely gray. Also, they do not have any visible bites on their flesh. These enemies hold a unique trait in being able to open their heads to allow the parasite to consume prey. The Adjule spread in the Kijiju Autonomous Zone during the terrorist infiltration of the village, though it is uncertain if they were intentionally infected to aid the rebels or were the natural result of the parasite spread. Popokarimu was a genetically modified bat-based BOW produced by Tricell, created by infecting bats with the Las Plagas parasite. The creature resembles a large, mutated, overgrown bat, with an insect's thorax as a tail with several legs attached to it. This is probably the result of splicing together genes from bats and silkworms before infecting the resulting creature with Plaga Type 2. Its entire body is extremely resilient, with only the underside of its tail where the parasite emerges being vulnerable to the player's attacks. The creature was initially a prototype BOW, intended to be sold as part of a weapons deal to an unknown party in Africa by arms dealer Ricardo Irving. After finding out from a Tricell spy planted in the BSAA that the organization was onto the deal, Irving then moved the deal location to the mines near Kijiju and arranged to have the Uroboros test subject left at the original location to ambush any BSAA agents that showed up. However, while the test subject successfully killed the BSAA team, it ultimately failed to kill Chris and Sheva, who subsequently were able to recover data which led them to the new deal location. Learning of their survival, Irving ordered the prototype BOW to be released from a container truck in an attempt to stop his pursuers. However, despite its best efforts, the creature was shot out of the sky by Chris and crashed on top of the truck, which then promptly fell off a cliff with the creature and exploded. The creature returns again later on when the agents went to investigate Tricell's facility in the ancient Napaya ruins. After a fierce battle, the creature then attempted to chase the pair but was subsequently crushed to death when part of the ruins collapsed on it, finally finishing it off for good. Ndesu was a series of human bioorganic weapons developed by Tricell, utilizing the mutagenic effects of Type 2 Plaga. These BOWs were directly inspired by the El Gigante, a similar product created by Los Illuminados. The BOWs are named after a man-eating demon found in Central African folklore and are known for their size and durability, which is the result of mutagenic effects of chemical secretions from the 5 Type 2 Plagas which were inserted into their bodies. Ndesu have a pale gray/brown skin hue, with wide eyes lacking visible pupils. Tricell provided Ndesu with spiked bracelets to be used as weapons, and one Ndesu in particular is known to have adorned his belt with battlefield trophies, such as skulls and corpses of the recently deceased. At least one Ndesu was shipped to Kijiju in March of 2009 for the inspection of a prospective buyer. Ricardo Irving, its seller, was forced to use Ndesu to attack the BSAA instead when their operation ruined the intended deal. Ndesu killed most of the BSAA soldiers within the city and tied one around its belt as a trophy. When more BSAA members arrived from the savannah, Ndesu killed the soldier Dave Johnson and fought Chris and Sheva, who relied on their Gambit's machine gun turrets. During this fight, it was backed up by Majini armed with crossbows, but ultimately it died from injuries sustained as its plagas were killed one by one. The Napaya are an ethnic group inhabiting West Africa in and around the Kijiju Autonomous Zone, who reside within the marshlands upriver from the city of Kijiju, as well as an ancient underground city nearby. Only bits and pieces are known of the tribe's culture. At least 3 deities were worshipped by them: a sun god responsible for movement of sun in the sky, and a moon god responsible for the phases of the moon, were both worshipped on altars in forms of a gold and silver idol respectively. A war god was also worshipped in the form of a ceremonial mask said to belong to it. Aside from this, a ritual mask is also known to have been worn by the chieftains, which appears to be a 4-eyed elephant with sharp wooden teeth and colored rope for hair. One of the most important icons in the Napaya religion, however, is that of the Sonnentrep, a flower which contains the progenitor virus within its genome. Tribal art typically had flowers adorning them, and following the collapse of the Napaya kingdom, the ritual eating of flowers continued on. How old Napaya society is uncertain, due in part to a cultural secrecy around their origins. What is known is that hundreds or thousands of years ago, the Napaya discovered a cavern on the edge of the marshlands, inside which lay flowers which were capable of producing an RNA virus. Exposure to the virus caused a fatal sickness to almost all who consumed the plants, though at least one man was able to survive exposure, and as a result, mutated into a powerful being beyond any human abilities. While the Napaya may have had a number of rulers over this period of their history, their folklore suggests a single mutant king living for centuries. During this time, the Napaya constructed a massive city in the cavern, using engineering skills far in advance of any other civilization on Earth. Complex use of reflective materials allowed sunlight to reach the city, with concentrated light being used as high-powered lasers to defend the Garden of the Sun, where the flowers were protected from prying eyes. A staircase was constructed, which those claiming the right to be a king would climb to consume the flowers, which became known together as the Stairway of the Sun. The decline of the Napaya kingdom is believed to have been sudden. As indicated by murals detailing their history, a number of animals were mutated from exposure to progenitor, either accidentally or intentionally, and all became dangerous creatures. They were confined to the lower levels of a sinkhole, where human sacrifices would be conducted to keep them fed. These creatures eventually escaped from the sinkhole and massacred the citizens, killing the king in the process and forcing survivors to flee. The murals also indicated that after massacring most of the population, the mutated beasts soon resorted to killing and eating each other. This most likely explains why they went extinct so suddenly. Though the refugees returned to the marshlands, they always intended to one day return with a new king. To keep the city safe, it became tribal law that all men between the ages of 13 to 25 serve in their army and guard the city from intruders, making sure that knowledge of the ruins could never be spoken to outsiders. The first known contact with Europeans took place in the mid-late 19th century, in the form of an expedition led by a man named Henry Travis, son of a prominent British merchant family. Travis's Encyclopedia of Africa contained remarkably detailed insight into the Napaya folklore, though was largely ignored by audiences. However, his writings later inspired an American eugenics circle in mid-1966 to explore the region and find the elusive flower, which was hypothesized to be the source of a virus they dubbed progenitor. The expedition fought with the Napaya warriors for 3 months until the flowers and virus were discovered and confirmed to exist, upon which they left in December. A second expedition took place in April of 1968 when the first expedition failed to produce the virus from the flowers. Faced again with the Napaya attacks, a third expedition directly confronted the warriors, and by August, the Napaya had lost control of half the city, including the Garden of the Sun. Many Napaya defenders perished not by guns, but by the effects of the progenitor virus disease before they lost the garden. 2 weeks following the capture, construction began on a research facility for studying the flowers, with soldiers being paid well to keep the Napaya out. At some point following the closure of the facility, the Napaya began moving back to the ruins, though were unable to prevent Tricell's construction in its place. In the years following their driving out of the city, the Napaya also lost control of much of the wetlands to Tricell, which was interested in oil exploitation. Though confined to the crocodile-infested marshes, they were kept safe by complex engineering knowledge, which had survived the fall of the kingdom, and relied upon a wood and rope transport system comparable to a skytram for longer distance transport. In 2008, the Napaya in the wetlands became the focus of bioweapons testing, and were deceived into taking injections of Type 3 Plaga eggs. The Plagas killed the women and children in their attempts to take over their host bodies, and mutated the men and older boys into powerful, and in some cases taller forms, at a cost of unrivaled aggression towards almost all non-hosts. The massive presence of human skulls and rib cages found thereafter offered the possibility that Napaya members who refused injection were eventually ritually murdered. In March of 2009, the BSAA mission in Kijuju uncovered the testing on the Napaya purely by accident, but unfortunately, upon infiltration of a BSAA rescue team, all soldiers were violently murdered, with one ritualistically sacrificed to a crocodile. Chris and Sheva would later infiltrate the marshlands, wiping out most of the tribe on their way through their villages to the oil field. Giant Majini were a form of Majini victims resulting from Tricell's experiments of the Type 3 Plaga on the Napaya tribe. These particular Majini were the village chiefs, wearing ceremonial masks to symbolize their ranking. These individuals reacted much more positively to the Plagas than most, causing their bodies to grow until they were nearly 10 feet tall, with a proportional increase in strength. Giant Majini wore elaborate bulletproof headdresses, making leg and back areas the best route to take when fighting them. They are armed with enormous spiked clubs made of bones from their enemies, which they swing with tremendous force. You can tell if one is near when they make a high-pitched call. Another way to know when one is approaching is to listen for the sound of the rings on their ankles jingling like bells. They, like other members of the Napaya tribe, have a tremendous jumping ability, meaning they do not require ladders to get around. Crocodiles are encountered in the marshlands near Kijuju. They dwell in waist-deep water and are capable of killing their prey with a single bite. They can be killed, however, more crocodiles will then enter the area and only surface when prey is nearby. They are very large, roughly 15 to 20 feet long. Judging by the animal's size, all the crocodiles encountered are probably Nile crocodiles and are all most likely male. These creatures seem to be used by the Wetlands Majini for human sacrifices, as Chris and Sheva witnessed the tribe feed an agent to the crocodile. Also, if the Majini falls into the water after being shot, the crocodiles will surface and devour them as well. After killing a crocodile, if you listen closely, you can hear bubbling sounds usually made by Plaga-infected enemies that are killed. Despite this fact, it is possible that the crocodiles aren't infected with the Las Plagas, since crocodiles of this size do exist. Ricardo Irving, also known as the Merchant of Death, was an American black market dealer of bioweapons who gained a global presence in the aftermath of the Terra Grigia panic from Resident Evil Revelations 1. Irving's activities in the bioweapons black market date back at least as far as the mid-2000s, by which point he was a senior partner in Tricell's illegal bioweapons research, led by Tricell Africa CEO Excella Gionne and former Umbrella USA researcher Dr. Albert Wesker. Irving's role in the operation was as the dealer. He sold bioweaponry to terrorist groups across the world, with profits being reinvested in bioweapons development and footage of the terror attacks, used to evaluate the effectiveness of the existing BOWs. Starting from the spring of 2008, Irving began using the politically unstable Kijuju region of West Africa as a testing ground for Tricell's latest bioweaponry, mainly the Type 2 and Type 3 Plaga species, derived from samples supplied to Tricell by Wesker years prior. During April of 2008, he traveled from the oil field to the main village of the Napaya tribe and warned them of a disease in the area that they needed to be protected against. Over the next week, the villagers were injected with Type 3 Plaga eggs, which slowly drove the men insane and killed the women and children. Operations involving the Type 2 Plagas took place by mid-December of 2008, as Irving began selling samples to Kijuju nationalists who sought to resume their country's civil war. The BSAA would eventually become suspicious of increasing violence in Kijuju due to the strange number of animal mutilations that took place alongside it. During February of 2009, BSAA agent Reynard Fisher photographed Irving in a private meeting with soldiers. The BSAA was aware that his air travels around the United States took him to locations where bioterrorist attacks occurred, and that his travels took place immediately before and after. His presence in Kijuju verified their suspicions, and an investigation was quickly ordered by Chris Redfield, which confirmed their suspicions and established an approximate date of his next deal with an American buyer. Due to the presence of spies within BSAA, Irving became aware of the operation to arrest him and changed the planned deal location with an American buyer to the foreman's office in the local mine, though he still tricked the BSAA to go to his original warehouse location. On Thursday, the 5th of March, the BSAA team moved into the warehouse and were set up by an Uroboros creature. The setup did not go entirely as expected, as although Alpha Team was totally wiped out, they were ultimately successful in obtaining important information from his computer, which pointed towards the real location of the deal site. Irving, who had remained within the building, narrowly avoided being captured by Bravo team members Chris and Sheva, as Jill rescued him just in time. Once Irving made it to safety, he then sent a Majini into the mines, driving a truck that carried the experimental Popokarimu creature he was planning to sell. He had also ordered the Ndesu BOW be released from confinement to remove the BSAA Delta team that had just been sent in to continue where Alpha had left off. The following afternoon, Irving had not only made his way into the oil field, but also had explosives set up around one of the refineries as part of a plan to kill any BSAA survivors in his way. Setting off the charges as he left on a boat, Captain Josh Stone, Chris, and Sheva were able to get on a boat and kept up the chase. Once the group caught up to the ship, Irving then had no choice other than to use a dominant species plaga on himself. Ultimately, even his mutant form wasn't enough, and he was fatally wounded. Dying on the deck of his yacht, he revealed the location of the secret lab and accidentally implicated Excella Gionne. Nonetheless, he remained confident his killers were doomed to share his fate and saw no harm in telling them. Bui Kichwa is the adult form that submissive type 2 plaga parasites generally mutate towards. When the parasite finds it necessary, it may erupt from the host's body and roam around independently. They have just one single attack, which involves them leaping onto the victim and wrapping their legs around them, where they then begin to drain their health, which surprisingly doesn't do a lot of damage. The real danger from Bui Kichwa is that while one is latched onto a character, they become completely defenseless and move very slowly, putting them in great danger from other enemies. However, just like any plaga parasite, it can be instantly removed through the use of flash grenades. The liquor beta is the result of Tricell's decision to research and develop from the liquor data left behind by Umbrella, following continuous high demand on the black market for these creatures. The beta variant was created after administering the progenitor virus to an average liquor. This variant of the liquor was physically stronger and larger than their T-virus counterparts and had a heightened sense of awareness. They also had the ability to reproduce at a fast rate. This fertility rendered it more of an actual animal. Like the standard liquor, the beta variation was blind, yet still possessed an increase in hearing sensitivity, allowing it to trace loud sounds to their source almost instantly. Like their naturally occurring forerunners, the liquor betas would travel in groups, therefore it would quickly become dangerous when a sound alerts many at one time. One major difference from the original is the creature's vastly increased muscular mass, as well as an improved sense of smell. One weakness exhibited by the liquor beta was an exposed heart located in the center of its chest. A simple knife can end a beta's life with a single stab to its organ. This creature was mass-produced by Tricell before their collapse, and as such, they were commonplace of the black market and frequently ended up in the hands of terrorists. The U8 was a large, darkly colored, genetically engineered arthropod born out of research into Las Plagas. It was a hybrid creature composed of the refined DNA of multiple organisms, specifically the DNA of shelled organisms, which was then infected with an unknown strain of the plaga. Size-wise, the U8 was some dozens of feet tall, and its pincer legs over 10 feet in length, which it used as a weapon in close combat. These pincer attacks were not especially quick, but they were powerful enough to pierce the armor of a tank. Adding to its offensive power were several flying BOWs resembling mosquitoes, which resided in part of the U8's abdomen. These flying BOWs were not larval U8s, but completely different creatures entirely, and attacked by flying into and piercing their target. The U8 was also well equipped defensively, as its thick carapace had an unparalleled durability. As a result, in a close quarter one-on-one fight, the U8 was an overwhelmingly powerful adversary, but when it had to combat more than one opponent at a time, its large size became somewhat of a liability. Its considerable bulk made it difficult to transport to target locations. It also left it exposed to long-range attacks by multiple opponents. The U8's size was also a detriment because it meant that it required massive amounts of substance to maintain functionality. As such, U8s were not suitable for long-term assignments. According to Tricell's business information, the U8 was most effective as security for a facility, or when used in attacks of limited time. By far the biggest drawback suffered by the U8 though was that due to it being designed to reach a large size very rapidly, its quick growth often bred exploitable imperfections into its carapace. These imperfections were limited to certain areas of the carapace, but a direct attack on this area would severely damage the U8. In attempt to remedy this, a newer model named the U8 Prime was later devised by Tricell with a multi-layer carapace, granting it even greater durability. Another model featuring a lighter weight carapace race was also conceived, but ultimately shelved when the loss of offensive and defensive ability was determined to be too great. During the incident in Kijiji, one of the original U8 models was released in the Tricell facility to hunt down and kill Chris and Sheva. After its unprotected legs were damaged, the creature collapsed onto the platform, which allowed the duo to force explosives down its mouth, destroying its head and ultimately defeating the creature. The base Majini were a security force which served Tricell in defending their top secret bioweapons development facility near Kijiji. These enemies were once former soldiers or insurgents native to Kijiju's country that were tricked into being infected with Tricell's Plaga parasite. Due to their familiarity with weapons, the base Majini were armed with stun rods, AK-47s, rocket launchers, hand grenades, and bulletproof shields. The Gatling Gun Majini are enemies that appear in the later portions of Resident Evil 5, where they are stationed to guard the bioweapons development facility. These creatures were given an enhanced strain of the Plaga, making them much more stronger and durable compared to a traditional Majini soldier. They are very large muscular men that wear a beret and a pair of sunglasses. They also have a cigar in their mouths, a yellow or red vest, a necklace around their necks, and army cargo pants. They carry a Gatling gun that has an ammunition container mounted on their backs, and use it to eliminate anyone that trespasses the facility. Duvalia are a mutant variety of the Type 3 Plaga, which emerges from its Majini host by destroying the entire upper body. It appears as a large flower-like parasite with thick armor on the outside of its body. Its weak points are the fleshy tail that hangs off of its back, and the fleshy core of its shell, which is only exposed when the Duvalia is about to attack its foe, or if shot in the legs repeatedly. In addition to these, and the usual weakness to bright light, a Duvalia can be blown to pieces with a single hand grenade if the explosive hits the core. The Reaper is a cockroach mutated into a giant humanoid form, similar to the Chimera BOW. However, it is not part of any bioweapons project, neither from Umbrella nor Tricell. It's actually a completely random and unprecedented mutation of common African cockroaches following exposure to the Uroboros virus. According to a file, the exposure happened due to a fire in the Tricell African Research Facility, where spores of the Uroboros virus would spread in the surrounding area. Standing upright at around 7 feet, the Reaper has 2 pairs of limbs used as arms and 1 pair used as legs. However, it can still use all 3 pairs to crawl around if needed. Its arms end in huge jagged claws that can be used to slash and stab its prey. Its rigid carapace protects it from explosive damage, and it has a powerful regenerative ability that enables it to quickly restore lost limbs. It also has the ability to generate a chemical vapor that can interfere with vision, making it harder for attackers to get a shot on it. The Reaper's main weakness are the luminescent white sacs on its body, presumably important organs externalized by its mutation. Damaging these sacs will bypass its otherwise excellent durability and enable relatively quick and efficient termination. Uroboros Mkono was a specific manifestation of the virally created Uroboros creature, birthed from an anonymous test subject in a Tricell laboratory. It was far more dangerous than the Uroboros test subject, being much more aggressive and having 2 cores instead of 1. However, the creature had a major flaw of extreme sensitivity towards heat. Chris and Sheva used a nearby flamethrower to weaken Mkono, and then shot at its exposed vital organs. The Blob was a monster originating from the human prisoners trapped below the Spencer estate. After being infected with an unidentified virus and experimented on by Oswald E. Spencer's butler, they soon became the guards of the underground. Physically, Blob showed signs of decay, not unlike that of zombies. Furthermore, their faces appeared to be mutated into a maw, and their backs had increased size from muscle growth to the extent of needing a harness. This growth also had a yellow eye seen from behind, which served as a weak point on the creature. They possessed superior strength, able to carry anchors far larger than themselves, and could lift enemies off the ground single-handed. They also have heightened senses, as one of the blobs that was encountered by Chris and Jill was able to deduce that they were directly behind a breakable wall. Excella Gionne was a British-Italian businesswoman that was known for her leadership of Tricell and her involvement in Tricell's bioweapons program. She was born into the Gionne family, which was a dynasty of wealthy Italian merchants. Through her grandmother, she was also closely related to the British Travis family, who had founded Tricell in the years before her birth. Academically impressive, Gionne was elevated to university education at a young age and graduated from her school majoring in genetic engineering. With her family connections, Gionne was quickly recruited into Tricell's pharmaceutical division and would soon be approached by Dr. Albert Wesker, a former Umbrella virologist. Wesker saw her as a worthy business partner to maintain a stake in the bioweapons industry and provided her with research data on the T-Virus project he had access to. Around 2006, Gionne gained control of Tricell Africa, which allowed her to establish a massive bioweapons research facility in the Kijuju Autonomous Zone, within a cavern that housed a former Umbrella facility, as well as the natural home of the progenitor virus. By hiring Ricardo Irving, a bioweapons dealer, and giving him role as director of the nearby oil fields, Gionne was able to sell bioweapons in exchange for money to be used for more research and construction. Another addition to her team was Jill Valentine, who had been drugged a performance enhancer which made her obey their every command, making her a valuable strongwoman for the team. The Uroboros project reached its final stages by the start of 2009, and to prevent unexpected information leaks, Gionne ordered the murder of all researchers, leaving day-to-day operations in the hand of the Plaga-infected base Majini. When Irving began using the local area as a means of selling bioweapons to clients, the BSAA started to take notice of Kijuju, and by March deployed a force to engage them. Information left over by Irving led the BSAA to the Tricell facility, and soon enough, Gionne was forced to evacuate on a cargo ship with Wesker. In spite of this pressing emergency, Gionne spent these moments flirting with Wesker as the queen of his idealized new world, providing him with a new supply of the medicine and overseeing the Uroboros Mkono test. On the cargo ship, the Uroboros project had reached its completion, and missiles filled with Uroboros were loaded onto an assault bomber. At this point, Wesker saw no further use of Gionne other than killing Chris and Sheva, and infected her with Uroboros to put her claims to the test. Let out into the open against a pile of corpses, the virus failed to stabilize in her body, and instead used her vessel and the pile of corpses to achieve greater mass as a creature known as Uroboros Airy. Chris and Sheva managed to defeat Airy with the use of a conveniently located satellite laser device, which relayed target data to an orbital satellite. After 3 hits to its main core, Airy was defeated, ending the twisted tale of Excella Gionne. Albert Wesker returns in Resident Evil 5 once he partnered with Excella and established a BOW trade ring through Ricardo Irving. This connection to Irving got the attention of Dr. Spencer, who had Irving tell Wesker to visit the Spencer estate. There, the existence of the experiment known as the Wesker Project was revealed to him, which finally put to close many questions he had been struggling with since his time at Umbrella. Seeing no more use for Spencer, Wesker impaled him with a stab to the chest using an open hand. Immediately after, he was interrupted by Chris and Jill, now working for the BSAA, who had come to arrest Spencer. In the fight with the two, Wesker and Jill fell through a window and down the cliff edge. Having survived the plunge into the Atlantic and carrying an unconscious Jill, Wesker looked back on his previous run-ins with Resistance, as well as the revelation of his identity. From there, the Uroboros project began, which aimed to create a virus that would both rid the world of organizations like the BSAA and mutate those with certain genetic characteristics into superhuman beings. Jill was kept alive in cold sleep at Tricell's facility to serve as one of the test subjects, one of thousands who would be kidnapped over the next 2 years. Further analysis, however, determined that she had antibodies to the T-virus in her system, which made her a poor test subject. Rather than simply killing her, Wesker saw fit to have her injected with performance-enhancing drugs to serve unwillingly as one of his agents. In March of 2009, the BSAA was deployed into the nearby city of Kijuju to detain Irving after he was linked to a local uprising of suspected bioweapons associations. Chris and his partner Sheva were successful in killing Irving, and while dying, he was willing to give information that directed them to the cavern. There, the two met with Wesker, Excella, and Jill. Determined to keep everything on schedule despite the setback, Wesker and Excella departed to a cargo ship to continue operations. When When it was revealed that Chris and Sheva also boarded the ship, Wesker then infected Excella herself with Uroboros as a distraction, mutating her and creating a towering monster which caused catastrophic damage to the ship. Having learnt of Wesker's need for medicine, he was confronted during launch preparation for the stealth bomber and given an overdose of the particular medicine. Weakened but still dangerous, Wesker was able to take off from the carrier and fought the two on board the bomber. When the rear hatch opened up, he was pulled out, and though he made an attempt to take Cephallo with him, a gunshot wound sent him falling to the ground. As the stealth bomber was falling to the ground, he was able to survive the fall towards a volcano. With the Uroboros project ruined, Wesker destroyed one of the Uroboros-filled missiles so as to infect himself with the virus. The fight across the volcano was put to a close when a BSAA helicopter picked up Chris and Sheva, who were able to use RPGs to create an explosion that incinerated him after he fell into the lava, ridding themselves of Resident Evil's most dangerous villain. Click this video here to find out the lore of every enemy from Resident Evil 6. Thank you for watching.